Okay, brilliant. So, welcome everybody to this webinar from the LRIG Early Careers Professional Working Group, which is on communicating science in a digital world. So today, myself, Chris Trevelyan, and Jasmine Trigg from the ECP Working Group are going to talk about LRIG first of all, and then we're going to hear from some life science communications professionals, hear about their careers, and advice that they'd give to people starting into that space and wanting to get into that space. So if we could move to the next slide, please. So just to start off, LRIG. So who are we? So LRIG is a not-for-profit organisation, and the purpose of LRIG is to bring life science and drug discovery community together to share, connect, innovate, and collaborate on an open access basis. So we achieve this by laying out world-class conferences, networking events, webinars like the one we're doing today, and increasingly moving into digital content. So the LRIG community encompasses over 22,000 scientists from industry, including pharma and biotech of varying sizes, academia and life science suppliers, and all of the events are completely free to attend, and they're sponsored by our brilliant vendors and sponsors and our exhibitors. So LRIG's community, 70% of it work in the life science industry. So that includes biotechs, clinical research organisations, or pharmaceutical companies. And 20% is based in academia, and the remainder of those roles support the life sciences. So a third of the community defines itself as an early career professional. 20% of the community are budget holders, and 50% study drug discovery, 15% are in basic research, and 10% contract research, and then 6% in research tools. So geographically wise, 75% of the LRIG community is based in the UK, but this is becoming more increasing in that proportion based throughout Europe outside of the UK. So currently it's 13%, and there's 3% in the USA. So in terms of demographics, 50% of our community is female, 35% is non-white, and 3% identifies having a disability. So the community is a dynamic mix of research scientists, involved in all aspects of drug discovery research, and tools providers who seek to better equip the drug discovery process. So in terms of LRIG's values and purpose, so LRIG's values is that it's to always ensure the highest quality of content, and that content will be made readily accessible to all, and that we will always be an inclusive organisation serving a diverse scientific network. And in addition, LRIG will always be a volunteer-led organisation run by and for the life sciences community on a not-for-profit basis. LRIG's purpose, so LRIG is a community whose purpose is to bring the life science and drug discovery communities together to learn, share, connect, innovate, and collaborate on an open access basis. We achieve this through the provision of world-class conferences, networking events, webinars, and digital content. So I'll now hand over to my colleague, Jasmine, to introduce herself and today's webinar.
Great, thanks, Chris. So my name is Jasmine Trigg. As Chris mentioned, I'll be co-hosting today's panel. I am part of the LRIG ECP work group, but as my kind of day job, I'm a scientist for a company called Sartorius. So I'll quickly kind of introduce today's webinar, and then we can get on and meet the great panelists that we've got lined up. So today we'll be looking at kind of communicating science in a digital world. And we'll be able to learn about the diverse careers in this field of science communication. And this field is kind of growing rapidly. And alongside that, there's kind of different roles that people can uptake. So we'll look at these, we'll look at how you can kind of gain experience and stand out as well. And as part of our panel, we've got a great lineup, and some of these themselves are ECPs. So I'm really excited to discuss kind of all of their experiences in the science community field. So firstly, before we just introduce the panelists, I'll touch on some housekeeping quickly. So this is a panel session, and we really do encourage you to ask questions. So you'll note that the Zoom system itself has a Q&A section. So you can post your questions into this Q&A, and these will be then visible to all of the panelists and chairs. And you're also able to vote for any ones that are of kind of particular interest to you or kind of you want to promote to be answered first. So I'd really strongly ask you to kind of ask any questions as you go along, and we'll either kind of pick up on these as we go, or we'll have some time at the end to answer them as well. So now I'll just hand over back to Chris, who will lead some of the introductions to the panelists.
Brilliant. So firstly today, we have Keivan Richter. So Keivan is the Research Communications and Marketing Manager at Cancer Research UK. Keivan is an accomplished communications and marketing professional with over 5 years of experience in the life sciences sector and holds an MSc in molecular medicine from the University of Sheffield. As Research Communications and Marketing Manager at Cancer Research UK's innovation arm, Cancer Research Horizons, Keivan leads brand development, marketing campaigns, and global strategies for Cancer Research Horizons, enhancing its impact in cancer research and therapeutic innovation. He has successfully overseen major initiatives, including the launch of Cancer Research Horizons and more recently CFurber, which is a groundbreaking children's and young people's cancer consortium in partnership with LifeArc. Beyond his work at Cancer Research UK, Keivan is proud to serve as an engagement strategy workgroup member for ELRIG UK. In this role, he helps shape strategic marketing and communications efforts, driving community growth and fostering engagement to support ELRIG's mission and vision. We also have Dr. Lois Manton-O'Byrne. So Dr. Lois Manton-O'Byrne is Executive Editor at Select Science. She's passionate about science communication and committed to making complex scientific concepts available for a scientific audience through high-quality content. Lois holds a PhD in chemistry and has expertise based in drug design, polymerization, and many analytical techniques. She has had the privilege of working with some of the most influential scientists globally, including Nobel Prize winners and industry leaders, to share their stories on accelerating science. We then have Mariam El-Shetlawi. She is an award-winning biotechnologist and science communicator with expertise in biotechnology, science advocacy, business strategy, and startups. Mariam is currently pursuing an MSc in experimental and translational therapeutics from the University of Oxford and holds a first-class BSc in biotechnology with enterprise from the University of Leeds. Her research excellence includes a first author paper on drug resistance in non-small cell lung cancer, published in Molecular Oncology with Professor Richard Bayliss. She has won the UAE Social Action Award for 2023 for her impactful COVID-19 outreach and was featured in Cosmopolitan Middle East for debunking vaccine myths. A former AstraZeneca brand ambassador, Mariam is committed to making complex science accessible and fostering connections between research, industry, and the public. And finally, we have Abby Edwards, who is content director and strategist at Biostrata. So Abby is a seasoned science communicator and integrated communications strategist with over a decade of experience in the life sciences. As a content director, strategist, and account consultant at Biostrata, Abby leads a talented team of writers and strategists while also providing guidance on account management and growth. A key part of her role in helping science and technology companies develop impactful communication strategies that enhance audience engagement and achieve business objectives. Abby is passionate about making complex scientific concepts both accessible and engaging, and by leveraging her expertise in PR, marketing, and content creation, she delivers tailored support to her clients, seamlessly integrating with their teams to drive success. As a dedicated mentor and advocate for inclusivity, Abby fosters professional growth and encourages collaboration within her teams, ensuring a positive and productive environment. So I'm sure you'll agree that we've got a great sort of breadth of expertise here today on our panel. And so without further ado, I'll invite Keivan in to start with our first pre-prepared questions. But as said, please feel free to post lots of questions in the Q&A. So Keivan, welcome to the panel. So I'll just start with first question is, what advice would you give to someone who wants to know how to gain a position in science communications? For example, what kind of experience would they seek out and what skills should they develop?
Yes, so I would say it's quite hard to stand out with no experience when you're applying at, for example, like a big organization. So if you were going to somewhere like, the AstraZenecas or cancer research horizons or whatever, that it's quite difficult to find those entry positions where, often I was told in an interview, we liked you, it was great, but someone else just had a little bit more experience. So a great place to start and get an entry position is like a smaller agency or company or startup. So, at an agency or a startup, etc., you will learn like the whole range of skills, which will, help you understand what you like. It's also easier to get a job like this. You can contact the CEOs themselves via email or LinkedIn. Um, Startups can be super crazy. You'll have to wear like many different hats and lots of unexpected responsibility. But that also sort of prepares you for a lot. And it's the same at like a sort of a PR agency as well. Otherwise, the other thing I would say to sort of get a foot in the door for science communication is that looking at sort of paid internships. So, for example, Accelerate a scheme at CRUK is 2 years, and you have a 6-month rotation where you try out different teams. It's a good way to like understand what you like in science communication because it's such a broad area.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I suppose it's very similar to what some people may have experienced in joining startups from a lab-based position as well, I guess, in that aspect of, like you say, wearing many hats, so something that can be transferred in terms of skill set there.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just there's just so much going on, and there's often not enough people. So you try out so many different things, which can be a lot, but you do learn a lot at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah, and would you say that's something that you find has helped you in your role at Cancer Research Horizons today? Like, did you hold a similar position in the past before joining there?
Yeah, so I used to work at a PR and marketing agency called Communications. And there, what I would do would be ranging from writing and distributing press releases and organizing interviews, writing articles, social media support. So doing a lot of these kind of things. And one of the like kind of big important things that you need to have when you're like sort of skills that you would need for any role really in science communications is being able to learn and effectively manage your time, but also communicate with like your managers and colleagues about tasks and where you are in terms of like uh, finishing them, etc. So having an entry position which is an agency or startup or something really is great for learning very quickly how to learn to effectively manage your time because you have to do so many different things.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. And then secondly, we'd just like to know what is the most rewarding part of your role representing Cancer Research Horizons?
So I guess like what I really enjoy about working at Cancer Research UK is that it's driven by a sort of passion of like helping people at its core. So when you're doing any sort of activity, know it like reminding yourself of what the sort of overall mission is and how that sort of tunes in with what my sort of own personal drivers are. That's been really important for me. And my role has also evolved a lot since the beginning. At the start, I worked across multiple channels, press, social events, newsletters, etc. But as the team has grown, I've been able to focus a bit more on specialist projects such as the launch of See Further, which you kindly introduced earlier, which is our Children and Young People's Cancer Consortium, and working like doing an initiative such as that, where it's sort of like working in a space that's super niche and hasn't got enough attention is like super important to me because it feels like I'm really making a bit of a difference. But yeah, I guess the nub of it is that the most rewarding thing is just seeing everything coming off well and receiving feedback that validates sort of the work that you put in along the process.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you very much, Kevin, and we'll revisit with some more questions later on. So if I could now invite Abby to join in the panel.
Hi there.
Hi, Abby. So firstly, just want to start by asking, how have SciComm roles developed from your perspective over the past decade and what sort of changed in them to where we are today?
This is a big question, so I'll just try and focus on a few of the trends that I've kind of noticed over the time. So one of the biggest shifts I think I've seen is the kind of move away from incredibly like specialized roles to a broader cross-channel roles. So what I mean by that is like 10 years ago, you might have had like separate teams for kind of PR, then social, then content and marketing automation. Whereas now I'd say professionals are generally more versatile and they have to be more versatile. So they undertake like so then you have to understand how different channels work together and potentially even bridge PR and marketing, which are two completely different beasts in itself. And honestly know how everything fits together and actually be able to execute across more of what we'd call the mix, the communications mix effectively. So the way I like to think about it is we used to talk about people being T-shaped, so they'd have a kind of broad top level experience with kind of one skill set that where they kind of really specialized in. Whereas now professionals are kind of people in roles are expected to have multiple areas of deeper expertise. So they kind of have multiple spikes coming down from that initial top level branch, if that makes sense. So I'd say that kind of overall reflects the increasing complexity of marketing communications space as a whole, but that's a definite kind of change that we've seen over the last, like I said, 10 plus years now. Another change, and a much more recent one, I'd say, is the rise of AI and how that's affecting roles. So I definitely see AI as an assistant, whether that's a kind of for content generation, gleaming information that can be used in strategy workshops, whatever it might be, is definitely a tool and it's not replacing people. It's like it's not always 100% accurate. You still need kind of, people who understand the communication space using it. But I would say the role, the way it's impacting roles is versus necessarily needing to be able to go into some of the kind of deep analysis of certain parts of yourself. It's actually being able to use AI to help you with some of the kind of like legwork, so to speak, so you can actually focus more in on the strategies and the creative aspects and things. So it's actually about knowing what platforms can be used where and how to pilot them. So that's definitely a new skill that we didn't have to worry about 10 years ago. So that kind of piloting aspect's definitely true. Another thing that I have seen change as well, I'd say over time, is digital marketing becoming more prominent. And there's definitely like a greater emphasis on lead generation and return on investment. Often you'll see companies maybe try and focus a bit less on brand and PR since they're harder to attribute directly to sales. However, those areas still remain incredibly important. And honestly, companies that neglect them fully will probably struggle in the mid to long term. We also see that kind of publishers, so like Select Science, where Lois is at, now offer more paid options too. And actually knowing how to leverage those types of platforms is definitely another kind of skill. And that's kind of, again, changed roles. So I'd say there's more kind of marketing type roles within publishers that where you get to work for clients there, but also from an agency perspective, where we are really understanding the media landscape is hugely important. So we know that maybe for some activities we bring in Select Science and others, and then for like again, if you're in-house, again, that's really important. Don't neglect the media landscape at all. Even if you're just in more of a marketing function versus PR. Media was always thought about being PR only. No, not anymore. And then the final thing that I will touch on, so as I could go on for far too long, is I would say expectations have probably shifted slightly as well in the last 10 years, but definitely in the last like 5 for sure. So I'd say during COVID, understandably, we saw kind of life sciences saw a huge surge in investment, and companies really had to expand capacity to meet demand. Whether it was like an instrument manufacturer needing to provide more kind of cold storage, for example, across the kind of chain, and obviously with that became more demand again on marketing team. There's more demand in the market. The marketing team has more people to speak to. Also, there was quite a lot of pivoting had to happen as it had to across the world. So what I mean by that is if you were invested in going to an event such as our Discovery, those events were either cancelled or went to being digital only, which essentially meant that you had a lot of budget that you thought you'd assigned, but you had to push elsewhere. So again, there was like a lot of pivoting that had to happen, and actually the focus much more became on lead gen, return on investment, everything there. But at the same time, teams weren't necessarily expanded, so you're having just to find ways to deliver more with the same amount of resources. Since the COVID boom has burst a little bit, we generally saw lots of teams contracted, honestly, whether that was kind of, various roles, particularly kind of in-house, I'd say marketing teams have really kind of shrunken down over the last few years. So there's still fantastic opportunities there. But those teams, again, I'd say have to work smarter, and they often bring in third parties more to help them kind of meet their goals and objectives. Versus trying to execute everything themselves. It's just not possible. So that's a definite kind of change where you have to manage different third parties compared to kind of just executing. So we're seeing things kind of stabilize a bit more in life sciences as a whole, and I'd say it's kind of growth back on track. So it's definitely a very positive environment to be in. But those executives, the C-suite level people definitely have higher expectations than perhaps they would have done 10 years ago in in an ever increasingly competitive market.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much for that. And so secondly, what process do you use for taking such a complex and scientific concept and then turning it into something that can be accessed, but at the same time is also engaging as well?
Okay. So this one's quite difficult because honestly, I don't have a set framework that I work through in my mind. So I'll kind of unpick a bit of what I actually do. I think the first thing that's important is always to come back to knowing your audience before you even try to actually do the translation piece. Most of what we do at Biostrategy is actually B2B, so it's scientist to scientist, business to business communications. We also do some patient communications, so straight off, need to know at what level are you translating to. How I translate to PhD scientists is different to how I translate to patients or the general public, for example. So that's the main thing to start with, and then actually to then to kind of begin the distilling itself is I would take things and try and work out what the key takeaway is first. So you've just given me a lot of wonderful technical details, but what's the key takeaway? Why does it matter? What's the so what of this? And then kind of build that picture back up. So it's almost kind of, you want to kind of take it, break it down, understand it on the basics, and then build it based on your target audience. If that makes sense, quite hard to explain. But definitely by doing that, again, you're focusing on kind of what's the impact, why should the audience care? If we're not communicating that kind of aspect to them, they're not going to. You could have the best kind of bit of research or best instrument that can really allow some kind of major breakthroughs to happen. But if we're not communicating that effectively and telling the audience what the benefit is and why it matters, what impact it's going to have, you're not going to get them engaged anyway. I would also strongly recommend that people cut out unnecessary jargon. I think any technical space, and particularly in sciences, yes, whilst technical precision is important, the jargon isn't necessarily. Let's strip that out. And I'm pained to see so many marketers sometimes that go out that also use kind of almost buzzwords now, like accelerate or innovate and utilize and things. Take that all out. Let the story sing. If you kind of fluff it up with all of these words, it's not going to work. And honestly, lots of readers don't engage. So you can simplify things. So if I try and give an example to try and tie everything together, you could take something that just says our innovative state-of-the-art microscopy system that leverages advanced whatever it is to accelerate higher resolution imaging. Or you could just say our new microscope delivers some sharper images faster using advanced photonics. Do you see the difference? And that's what I mean, we're just kind of cutting out all the kind of fluff. And I think whether you're writing for the general public or scientists, people want to read engaging, well-structured copy. Use the active voice. As scientists, we're often taught to use passive voice. It makes things unnecessary, muddled sometimes. Active voice, clear, compelling copy, with some personality, is how you generally communicate what's important to say. Yeah, just don't get caught in the jargon world, I suppose.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Abby. So Jasmine is now going to ask questions of our remaining two panelists.
Great, thank you, Chris. So I'll probably start off with Lois, some questions there. Just invite you in. Hiya. So I think I'll probably start off by kind of asking what drew you into the science communications industry. So I know you kind of previously were in the field of kind of chemistry and lab-based, and what was that kind of initial, what made you want to pursue that career really?
Yeah, so my kind of background, as you mentioned previously, is sort of chemistry, but I have got experience in pharma laboratory. I worked in Basel for a year working for Roche, so I was designing some drugs there, and then I was doing my PhD, and I loved it. I loved being in the lab. I loved what I was doing, but I was, hopefully this wasn't just me, but like 70% of what I was doing wasn't working, and a very small percentage was, which I did like. But what really drew me to communication in science is really highlighting all the stuff that does work and all the success stories and the ability to have open access for science communication and what does work, but also what doesn't work. Let's share that. Let's share that with the scientific audience, and let's share those stories as well. And what drew me to select science is really the kind of bridging of the gap between science and the results and everything you're trying to do, but also with the laboratory technology. So how that is enabling you to do what you do. It's an absolute minefield for scientists to go out and buy laboratory technology that works for them. It's how we can help sort of facilitate that and share the real life stories of scientists in the laboratory utilizing technology in a way that benefits them and hopefully benefits others. So I like the idea of sharing all the success that does work, and I've also traveled the world doing that. So I interview scientists all over the world, and one that really kind of highlights to me is a professor in Virginia Tech, Tim Long. He, exactly what Abby said before, he said that you can be the best scientist in the world, and if you can't communicate what you're doing, it's not going to work. You need to be able to communicate, and you need to be able to share what you're doing. And obviously that adversity works as well. So you can have the best communicator in the world talking about something, fairly minor, but making a big impact. So it's just something that I'm passionate about, and in particular, enabling other people to communicate well in science.
That's really interesting to hear. And I think, I'm kind of lab based as well, but I definitely agree it's good to communicate what works really well, but I find it so useful to hear what doesn't as well. It's definitely helps me out. And I think it's kind of as part of your role as well, I mentioned it briefly, you kind of got to travel a lot and speak to a lot of kind of well-known people in the industry, and also I believe a couple of Nobel Prize winners. How was that? What was it like kind of working with kind of these figures?
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, every scientist I've interviewed, they're all amazing in their own kind of way, but it's really understanding the person behind the science. You would think a Nobel Prize winner, their career was completely like that, but actually, it's a roller coaster, and everyone is the same. There's things that happen that are positive, not all of those things. So it's really about the person and how that person has got to where they've got to, and then also the story of the science. Like we mentioned a minute ago, it's not everything works, and it's speaking to people like that and understanding their pathway and how they got to where they are, which I think is so important to everybody else, especially the audience today, and how it's not always just smooth riding. It's a roller coaster. But yeah, I've traveled the world, and I go to shows such as Elrig, and I go to we're big friends of Elrig. So we do lots of interviews. Usually every year there, but at different events. And then I also go into the laboratory and interview scientists. And what I love about that is that you get to go into places that you don't normally necessarily get invited to. How somebody is, running the lab is something you don't normally get in to see in real life. So I love going in and helping them share what they're doing, but also giving insight into how they're working and how their day-to-days are, and what their goals are and what they're trying to achieve, and the sort of science that they do in between. So I love that, because yeah, not many people get to go into other people's laboratories and see how it's run. And then so that's kind of one aspect of it, is I go into labs and do video interviews, and we have our own team, and what might be a simple video at the end has taken a small village to put together. So so it's us with the videographer, the team, the editorial team, also working with our marketing team, and then also with the manufacturers. So what technology does that person have in their lab that enables them to do that, and how can we all work together to share that story? So yeah, it's people coming together and working, and then what do we do with that video at the end? It's we turn it into an article, we turn it into a social post, we turn it into a webinar, we turn it into all these different types of content. And I am very passionate about utilizing each touch point with a scientist. We're all very busy. We've all got things that we're doing. So how do we really, every touch point with the scientist, every meeting, how do you maximize that and help both them, the manufacturers, and also the wider scientific community? So yeah.
No, that's great. It sounds really interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Great. So I'll now invite Mariam. See if we've got. Oh, hiya.
Hello.
So I think the first question for you is, so what are the kind of some of the challenges that you face with communicating science in a digital world?
Perfect. So I'll start with giving some context for background. So I studied biotechnology, but I'm currently doing a master's at University of Oxford, which is very science heavy. But my full-time day-to-day job is at a biotech startup, which is a spin-out from Oxford University, working on cancer vaccines. But my full-time role is more on the business side. So it's investor relations and kind of helping our CEO to lead our fundraise and bring in money so that the science continues. So that is the context for background. And I basically fell into science communication by accident. I didn't even know it was a thing. I wasn't very exposed to it. And it happened during the pandemic, during COVID. So when COVID happened, at that time, the UK, like universities in the UK, they canceled classes. And I had pretty much too much time on my hands. So I thought, oh, what am I going to do? But I was really passionate about biotech and the pandemic. So I started sharing online on social media posts about the virus, the different vaccines they're creating, why are they, different vaccines, and kind of putting like Q&A on my stories to see what questions people have and try to answer those. And that's basically how my version of science communication kind of started. And then because of that, I came across a lot of people on social media who are also science communicators. And I was like, okay, this is an actual thing. People do communicate science online. And I guess everyone saw that during COVID. But I think, some of the biggest challenges were trying to not oversimplify the information, but also not making it too granular. And it's tricky because you really have to understand your audience in order to know what to deliver. So you have to know, the demographic of your audience, the age, and everything, you could possibly think of. Like how does an audience think? If I was an audience, how would I react to a post or a video or a story? So you have to kind of make sure you deliver the right amount of information. And at that time, I think when, ChatGPT didn't really exist, it was more difficult and really, really time consuming. A lot of people don't, take into consideration how time consuming it is to create content. But I think now, there are so many sources that one could leverage in order to make their posts more like efficient and maximize how they are. So yeah, that was one of the biggest challenges. And obviously because there were lots of like myths and misinformation happening during COVID. So it's also another challenge about like bridging the gap between the experts in the field and the public. Like at some point during COVID, you had politicians talking about the science, not the scientists. And you were like, well, this is not an accurate representation of what we want to show. So, you have to be careful with the scientific language that you can use because to general audience, it is quite alien. And like Abby mentioned, avoid jargon and heavy content, just keep it simple. A few other challenges were probably, trust and authority online, which I think because of that, Instagram gave the authority to like verify accounts that were not really that popular. But also you have to keep in mind platforms have limitations. So like sharing content or creating content on Instagram versus LinkedIn, Twitter, or TikTok even, they're very different. The audiences on all platforms are different. The algorithms are completely different. So these are things you really need to take into consideration when communicating science online.
No, that's really interesting insight. I think, like you say, just kind of knowing your audience and kind of simplifying it for the public, and I guess being able to kind of create different content, I imagine is challenging. So kind of I believe you're ECP yourself, so kind of still slightly earlier on in your career. Kind of, is there any specific advice that you would give to those kind of early on in their career, or looking at kind of change into more science communication based roles, who want to get involved, and kind of particularly focus on how they might be able to do this alongside either current studies or things that they're working on?
I think the advice I could give is like overall science communication, it's not like you're tying yourself to doing one particular career your whole life. Like, that's not how it is. With a biology degree, you can do so many things, whether it's science communication, marketing, business development, even fundraiser, investor relations. Like there are so many things you can do, but one of the most important hard skills that one should carry regardless of what they do is science communication. Because if you plan on working in the science field but not being in the lab, you have to be kind of an excellent communicator for the science. And I think, the advice is you can start, it doesn't matter, like, I think like what Kevin said, like you don't necessarily have to start with big pharma. You can always start with startups or even doing something of your own to show your initiative. So for example, in my case, it was creating an Instagram page called The Biofreak at the time, where I shared about the virus and the pandemic. And that was kind of a stepping stone that then got me the opportunity to be an ambassador for AstraZeneca. So I guess what's important to them is also seeing that you have the drive and the passion and also the self-initiation to take things on. So you're not just waiting for an opportunity to get a job. You could do like part-time content creation for startups or for science pages online. So you can always start small, build the consistency, and experiment with different platforms. Also try out like blog posts, infographics, podcasts, TikTok, Twitter. Like there are so many things you can try. And I think it's always important to just give yourself that boost to try whatever is out there, because you don't know how or where it will go because of the algorithm. Like you could be posting the most random video on TikTok and it goes viral and you won't even know why it went viral, but it just happened to be. So you always have to keep trying. It's more like trial and error. But also speaking at like science events and conferences or outreach programs in schools, and just being actively engaged with like the UK tech accelerators and like the Bioindustry Association and the invests they do, because you get to meet a lot of people who are in the science field but not in the lab, and they could obviously give you like advice and connections and opportunities that you might not have had the chance to get to if you didn't attend those events. So those would be kind of my advice for anyone who's trying to take on science communication.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think, like you said earlier, you kind of ended up in a role that you didn't realize potentially existed in science.
Yeah.
Maybe like exposing yourself to different things and people that are doing stuff you didn't realize was kind of a career or a job is kind of a great way. Yeah, thank you. So I think we've got a bit of time now if we wanted to open up to any questions that have come in from the audience. And then we have probably 5 minutes or so just to close up at the end. Just see, so I think. Just check that. So we had one come in from someone who's from more of a basic cell biology lab, and they were asking how they can move into science communication, but specifically within kind of marketing and strategy after their PhD. Did anyone from the panel want to take that?
I think it's what Kayvan said before. It's about the getting experience and going out there and just trialing and getting experience in different companies and different organizations, and things like LRIG you can get experience with. There's volunteer-led situations that you can get involved in, and I would encourage everybody to do that. Even Select Science, if anybody's interested, please do reach out. So there's lots of different, I think, just ask the question. And and I think as Miriam said as well, there's lots of opportunities out there that you might not have thought of. So just go out there, have a look what's out there, and there's plenty out there for science communication, and it's such an exciting place to be. I for example started out as an editorial assistant, so I finished my PhD, came in as an editorial assistant, and now I'm executive editor. I've worked my way up the whole way. So there's opportunities out there at every different level as well.
Yeah, and before you even try to approach those initial opportunities, you can do some things yourself as well, right? There's lots of kind of free online resources about marketing. I'm saying marketing and strategy because that's what's been mentioned in the question, but any of the kind of communications mix, which go and access it. Do like some of the HubSpot free courses or something, kind of if you're really interested, show the kind of organizations that you're approaching that you've taken that initiative. That's the only other thing I'd add on, I think.
We do also have opportunities at Select Science where we encourage scientists, such PhD students and so forth, to be guest editors on Select Science. So it's a way to get your voice out there and to share your experiences. I think it's a good stepping stone to show that you are thinking about communicating, that you're trialing things, and you are getting the word out there about the work that you do.
We've also got another question. I know, Abby, you touched on this in one of your answers. Somebody has asked, do you have any advice on what kind of AI platforms could be useful in science communication?
Oh man, it depends what you're trying to do, and they all have their own strengths and weaknesses. If you want to be helping like with some research kind of things, then ChatGPT now it's connected to the wider web, and Perplexity are probably where I'd go to. If you're wanting help with some kind of content aspects, and you're probably looking between ChatGPT and Claude. But there are many out there, and there are some more kind of design focused ones as well. So I mean, other members of the panel, I'm sure, have used kind of different platforms as well. So it really depends on what you're trying to achieve, really, because there's about 10 different ones you could plug and play in.
Yeah, I'd agree with that as well. And I think just it's always been mindful that, like exactly what Abby said, they're a tool. They're not to replace people, and they're not to replace what people can do. So use it definitely as a tool and a way to enhance what you're able to do. Yeah.
That's great. So another question that's come in is whether you've got any kind of advice on how someone can develop their science communication. So it might be someone that's kind of knows a lot about the research, but finds it then tricky to kind of cohesively communicate that.
I think that comes with lots of practice, but especially previously when ChatGPT didn't exist, the way it would happen, at least for me, is like, okay, I'd write the content for whatever I want to share online, and then I'd read it back to myself and think, oh, if someone doesn't have a degree in biotech, what words would they be confused by, or what would they not understand? And then you could try to like autocorrect that, and it takes you like 5 to 6 tries to like get to the right, content that you want to put out there. So it comes with practice, but I think now you have ChatGPT and AI, so you can try to leverage it to help you. So whatever content you create, you can paste it into ChatGPT and ask it, if I was a 10-year-old kid, how would you translate this to me? And then I'm not saying you steal what's on there, but it kind of shows you what things you should change, and like how you should rephrase more of what you're saying. So I think it comes with lots of practice. But one of the things that helps is also like sharing or presenting to different audience, because then they ask you questions and that makes you think, okay, then I probably shouldn't mention this or rephrase it in a different way. So it's more so practice.
I agree with everything everyone else said, obviously, but I think something that is useful is if you feel like you can't do it on your own, there are science communication masters courses out there. This is a longer way. It costs money. I didn't do it, but like there are ways to do that, and I know a lot of people who are in the field, and that sort of is really great for really steering you on how to communicate. Otherwise, online there are like loads and loads of really good resources out there. If you just type in like improve science communication, there's a million documents out there. I put into the chat as well as a document that I always look to whenever I'm like advising for a job interview or something. It's like really good. It talks about all the different ways you can. It's basically a crack sheet for like for job interviews and communication. So yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Somebody has asked whereabouts is the best place to look for science communication related grad programs, as I've not seen many of those. Is there somewhere that is that something that kind of I guess exists, grad programs in science communications? And if so, are they listed somewhere specialty wise?
So they exist, but I wouldn't actually limit yourself to just looking for grad schemes. But I would say that maybe less common in science as a whole, but like just look for kind of more general like entry level jobs. Like so Lois said she started as an editorial assistant. It's like, well, kind of if you're interested in the publication side, start there. If you're thinking more agency or something, you're looking at an account executive kind of role. I would be looking at these because in no matter what like entry level position you go into, you're going to learn a lot, and you're going to learn quickly, and you'll have a lot of support around you. Most organisations have training schemes. So at Biosciata, particularly now we're part of a large group of agencies and part of Supreme Optimizations. Like we've got set training programs we put people through on. The jobs don't appear as grad schemes, but that's where like you're grad, you need science communications, go for the entry level. Like don't be kind of I wouldn't narrow your focus down that much at all.
Yeah, I completely agree with Abby. I think that's the best piece of advice you could give. Like, the simplest example is all of us on this panel, we didn't do grad schemes in science communication, and you never know how or where you want your career to change in the future. So it's not really the best path to like just narrow down all your options from now, because at the end of the day it is also a hard skill that everyone needs to pick up and have, like if they're in the science space anyway. So it's more about the experience.
I think to follow on from that, it's and the previous question, it's if you are really looking to get into science communication, I would say just, be inquisitive, ask your colleagues what they're doing, ask people whether it's at, the organization where you work or, your university, just ask questions. The more you know about the audience that you're trying to reach and the more you understand about that scientific field, even though you think you might know a lot, there's always something to learn. So I think just constantly be inquisitive, and with that, your communication will improve. So.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, and it probably kind of touches on one of the last questions that was on there about kind of maybe an undergraduate also looking to move into science communications as well. Like you say, just kind of asking and getting advice there and filling it out really. So we've probably got a couple of minutes if there's any final comments anyone wanted to make, or if there's any more questions that are coming in.
I think there's a question that says something on how can we find graduate schemes within science communications, and I was going to say other than that, like the internships and stuff that you can do. some of them won't be just called science communication. They won't even have science communication in necessarily in the like website when you're searching. So maybe it's worth also looking at what the sort of different job titles are that someone in science communication could do, and looking for whether there are grad schemes for that, or internships for that, if that's what you're looking for. I think what's difficult, I found difficult, is not at the beginning, is knowing what different job titles there even were in science communications, and so you can sort of like I didn't even think to do that, but I would research that and see what sounds good. And you can also find like the job specification of any role online, so like you can see if that's something that you would enjoy, and then apply for that.
That's a really, really good point. And actually, you can even go back a like step further of understand the difference between communications, PR, and marketing, even as well. Like those are three distinct fields in themselves, and lots of us have jobs that mean that we now go across the three. But yeah, definitely just try and understand the different options, like Kevin's saying, that actually exist out there. Like, what are the different job functions, and actually, what does like a marketing executive mean compared to like a PR versus like a brand person versus whatever. Like just search around, and then you'll find an area that sounds interesting, try it, and then like get as much exposure and experience as possible, honestly.
Great. That's great. Thank you, everyone. So I think that's probably all the time we have for questions. So I was just gonna briefly touch on some of the other events that our have got going on for the year. So this was our first ECP event with this webinar, and I hope everyone's enjoyed it. I think the discussion's been really engaging, and I think it's nice that we've had some time there at the end just to kind of answer audience questions as well. So yeah, we've just got a calendar up here for the year. So we do have a number of other free to attend events running for 2025. So we've got a couple of other webinars, but we also have free to attend in-person conferences such as R&I, which is taking place in London in March. And of course, we've got our big drug discovery conference. It'll be in Liverpool this year in October. And we've also got shorter forums both in kind of Europe as well as branching out into the US as well. So I'd really encourage you to go to the website and find out more information for these as well. So with that, I think I'll just say kind of a really big thank you to our panelists. We appreciate taking the time today, and it's been really great listening to kind of your career journeys and any advice you have. And also thank you to those that have attended as well. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.